Cape Verde, from an empty island nation in the middle of the Atlantic to a World Cup hero story and a historic battle with Argentina. When people talk about the World Cup, they usually think of football powerhouses with populations of tens or even hundreds of millions, along with massive sports infrastructure. But the world of football has always carried extraordinary fairy tale stories. One of them is called Cape Verde, or Cabo Verde, a small, dry island nation standing almost alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. From an uninhabited land, through the ups and downs of colonial history, migration, and the struggle to survive, this country of only about 600,000 people rose powerfully onto the biggest stage on Earth. They even created a shock when they fought toe-to-toe against the giant Argentina, losing only 2-3 in extra time because luck wasn't on their side. This article will take you from raw, volcanic mountains, through the highs and lows of history, a rich mixed culture, and finally into the emotional heartbeat of football, with Cape Verde's blue sharks. Open a world map and look out into the Atlantic Ocean. About 560 to 600 kilometers off the coast of Senegal in West Africa, Cape Verde appears like a crescent moon floating in the middle of a vast ocean. The country is made up of 10 main islands and many smaller islets, with a total area of just over 4,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Bali in Indonesia. Its geographic isolation means Cape Verde has no land borders, no close neighbors, and only the ocean surrounding it on all sides. A country born from volcanoes. Unlike lands formed by river sediment, Cape Verde was born from volcanic activity under the sea millions of years ago. The clearest mark of that process is Pico do Fogo, a volcano standing 2,829 meters tall on Fogo Island, the highest point in the country. This volcano isn't dead. It's still active, and its most recent eruption in 2014 destroyed several villages and forced hundreds of people to evacuate. A harsh climate and an endless thirst. If there's one thing that shaped the history and character of Cape Verdeans, it's water. The archipelago lies in a semi-arid Sahel climate zone. Hot harmattan winds from the Sahara Desert often blow through the islands, carrying dust and sand across the sky. Natural rivers are almost non-existent, and rainfall is extremely limited. Today, nearly 100% of household water depends on seawater desalination plants. Because of this climate, only about 10% of the land across the islands is suitable for farming. The dry soil forces the country to import up to 90% of its food. The harshness of nature, with long droughts during the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, once caused terrible famines that took tens of thousands of lives. And yet, this hardship planted the seed for one of the greatest human transformations in the country's history. Before the 15th century, Cape Verde was completely uninhabited. There were no native tribes and no residents living there. Everything began in 1462, when Portuguese explorers arrived. A colonial center and a slave trading stop. Only 6 years after the islands were discovered, the first settlement, Ribeira Grande, now known as Cidade Velha, on Santiago Island, was founded. It became the first European colonial plantation settlement in the tropics. Cape Verde's strategic position at the crossroads of the Atlantic turned it into an important link in global trade. For centuries, it served as a major stop in the transatlantic slave trade. Tens of thousands of Africans were brought here, held, sorted, and then forced onto ships crossing the ocean to the Americas. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Cape Verde also became a common stop for whaling ships, especially those from New Bedford in the United States. Cape Verdean sailors were known for their toughness at sea, and American captains often recruited them. This became the origin of the first Cape Verdean communities that settled in North America. Charles Darwin's visit. Another interesting historical milestone came on January 16, 1832, when the legendary HMS Beagle arrived at the port of Praia. The scientist Charles Darwin spent 3 weeks in Cape Verde. His observations of tropical plants and animals, volcanic geology, and the local ecology became some of the early foundation data that later helped him develop his great theory of evolution. The road to independence and democracy. Although slavery was abolished in 1876 and residents were recognized as Portuguese citizens in 1961, inequality still remained. Under the leadership of national hero Amilcar Cabral, a brilliant intellectual who founded the Paige Party in 1956, the independence movement grew stronger. Taking advantage of political change in Portugal in 1974, Cape Verde officially declared independence on July 5, 1975. Instead of falling into violence or dictatorship like many African countries after independence, Cape Verde achieved something remarkable in governance. In 1991, the first multi-party election took place smoothly, marking a peaceful transfer of power. Since then, Cape Verde has been seen as one of the most stable and transparent democracies in Africa, operating under a parliamentary republic system. A lack of natural resources forced Cape Verde to invest in its most valuable gold mine, its people. This island nation has a very distinctive demographic and cultural picture. A multi-ethnic community, Cape Verde is the result of a long history of migration and colonization. Most of the population is Creole, a mix of Portuguese and African ancestry. There are also African minority groups, such as the Falupes, Balantes, and Mandingas. Cape Verde also has people of European descent, including descendants of the Portuguese, Italians, French, and British. There's also a notable community descended from Sephardic Jews, including those who fled the Iberian Peninsula in the 15th and 16th centuries, as well as Jews who came from Morocco in the late 19th century. This blending has created a tolerant and diverse Cape Verdean identity, a country with more people overseas than at home. Because of deadly droughts in the past and the desire for a better life, Cape Verdeans migrated in large numbers. Today, the population living inside the country is only about 600,000, while the Cape Verdean diaspora overseas is estimated at more than 1 million people. They're concentrated in places such as the United States, Portugal, France, the Netherlands, and other countries. Recognizing this strength, Cape Verde's constitution allows dual citizenship and reserves seats in parliament for representatives of the diaspora. Culture, language, music, and food. Language. Although Portuguese is the official language used in administration, Criollo, a blend of Portuguese and West African influences, is the mother tongue and the soul of everyday communication. Music Morna is a slow, deeply emotional music style that reflects homesickness and the sadness of separation across the ocean. The legendary singer Cesaria Evora, known as the Barefoot Diva, brought Morna and Cape Verde's name to the world. This heritage has been recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Food, cachupa, a traditional stew made from corn, beans, meat, or fish, is the soul of the meal. It represents sharing and hospitality among the people. Even with limited resources, sharing food is an unwritten rule in this country. Cape Verde has no oil, no diamonds, and no natural gas. Yet it has one of the highest GDP per capita levels in West Africa, with GDP PPP at around $13,000 per person. This development came from excellent governance and the ability to make full use of what the country had: remittances, tourism, and renewable energy. Money sent home by the overseas community contributes around 10 to 15% of GDP, acting as a lifeline for the economy. The Cape Verdean Escudo, or CVE, is pegged to the euro, helping control inflation and creating a safer environment for investors. Turning disadvantage into opportunity, the intense sun and white sandy beaches have turned Cape Verde into a kind of Maldives, or Caribbean of Europe. Tourists from Britain, Germany, and the Netherlands fly here to escape the winter cold. Wind and sunlight are also being used for renewable energy to reduce dependence on imported oil. To support tourism and connectivity, this country of 600,000 people has built 4 international airports and 3 domestic airports. Discovering 10 gems in the ocean, the islands are divided into 2 main groups: the Windward Islands, or Barlavento, in the north, and the Leeward Islands, or Sotavento, in the south. Santiago, the largest island, home to the capital city Praia, holding about half of the country's population, and proud of its 500-year-old kapok tree and the historic site of Cidade Velha. São Vicente, the cultural heart of the country. The deep-water port of Mindelo was once built by the British as a coal station and is now the cradle of traditional music. Santo Antão, the second-largest island and a paradise for hikers. with deep valleys, subtropical forests, and breathtaking trails. Fogo, the island of fire, home to the highest volcano, with fertile land that produces some of the best coffee and wine in the region. Sal, the main tourism center, famous for the Pedra de Lume salt mine, inside an old volcanic crater and paradise beaches for surfing. Boa Vista, a landscape mixing desert and blue sea. It's the third largest nesting site in the world for the rare loggerhead sea turtle. São Nicolau, known for rugged mountains and the town of Ribeira Brava, with colorful houses glowing in the morning sun. A peaceful island with untouched beaches, the country's largest forest area, and rare bird species. Brava, the island of flowers, the smallest inhabited island and the greenest one, with a history tied to whaling. Santa Luzia, the smallest island, completely uninhabited, and a quiet anchoring paradise for luxury yachts. If the economy and politics show Cape Verde's vision, football is where the soul, pride, and strength of the entire nation come together. In this country, football feels almost like a religion. From sandy beaches to empty lots on volcanic slopes and small seaside stadiums, you can see children holding a ball and dreaming of going beyond the horizon. Cape Verde's national team is nicknamed the Blue Sharks, a name that reflects toughness, sharpness, and the refusal to back down before rough waves. To overcome the barrier of a tiny population, the Cape Verdean Football Federation used a smart and open strategy, calling up talent from the diaspora. With flexible nationality rules, any player born in Portugal, France, the Netherlands, or the United States with Cape Verdean parents or grandparents can wear the blue shirt of the homeland. These players were trained in some of Europe's top football academies. They absorbed modern tactical thinking, but deep in their hearts they still carry Creole blood and the fighting spirit of their ancestors. The mix of European technique and African instinct turned the Blue Sharks from an unknown team into a powerful rising force. The peak of that journey was qualifying for the 2026 World Cup, making Cape Verde one of the smallest nations in history to appear at football's biggest event. Just seeing their blue flag with 10 yellow stars flying at the World Cup was already a massive victory. Billions of people around the world began asking, "What country is Cape Verde?" and then became amazed by their fairy tale story. Going into the 2026 World Cup campaign, almost no one placed expectations on a country with only about 500,000 people. When Cape Verde earned an impressive draw against Spain, the Red Bulls, in the group stage, many fans and experts simply said it was luck. But their determined matches against Japan, Uruguay, and Saudi Arabia proved otherwise. With incredible toughness, the Blue Sharks squeezed through a narrow door and reached the round of 32. And there, fate placed them face-to-face with the giant of South American football, Argentina, a team filled with elite stars and a proud championship tradition. The official 90 minutes, the Blue Sharks make their statement. The gap looked enormous, but what happened on the field told a very different story. Although Argentina controlled the match and scored first, Cape Verde proved they weren't just there to make up the numbers. The class of the South American champions appeared in the 29th minute, when superstar Lionel Messi scored to put Argentina ahead. But Cape Verde stayed fearless and refused to shake. In the 59th minute, they organized a sharp counterattack that allowed Deroy Duarte to fire a precise shot and tie the match 1-1, stunning millions of viewers. The African team defended with extreme discipline. Many people had expected them to lose energy quickly against Argentina's magical passing, but Cape Verde's players stayed remarkably strong until the final minutes of regulation time. Their tireless duels took away Argentina's chance to finish the match early, forcing the South American giant into 2 tense periods of extra time. Extra time, a score chase, and the tragedy of an own goal. The dramatic chase truly reached its peak in the 30 minutes of extra time. At the start of the first extra time period, center-back Lisandro Martinez seized the moment and restored Argentina's 2-1 lead in the 92nd minute. But the spirit of those born from ocean wind and sunlight didn't allow them to collapse. In the 103rd minute, Sidney Lopes Cabral made the entire stadium explode when he shined again, leveling the score at 2-2 for the small island nation. Cape Verde's excellent fitness and extraordinary endurance allowed them to trade blows evenly with a star-studded opponent until the very last moments. Across the streets of Praia, Mindelo, and even among overseas communities in Europe, millions of Cape Verdeans held their breath with every touch of the ball. But football can be cruel. Tragedy struck in the 111th minute. While trying to drop back and clear a messy situation, Dini accidentally scored an own goal, making it 3-2 for Argentina in a moment of complete helplessness. Even after fighting until the last drop of sweat and maintaining incredible pressure despite legs that had run for more than 110 minutes, luck still turned away from the Blue Sharks. When the final whistle blew, Cape Verde's players collapsed onto the field. Tears rolled down the faces of the men in blue, but not one of them lowered his head. In the stands, Argentina fans stood and applauded the courage and extraordinary fitness of their opponents. That 2-3 extra-time loss wasn't a defeat. It was a great hero's story, the clearest proof of the strength, willpower, and resilient spirit of the Cape Verdean people. Cape Verde's journey, from an uninhabited archipelago to a thriving democracy in Africa, and from a country of only 600,000 people to a team that shook World Cup history against Argentina, is one of the clearest examples of human willpower. They turned the harshness of nature into resilience. They turned geographic isolation into a global network. They turned a lack of resources into motivation to develop their people. Despite the heartbreaking extra-time loss, Cape Verde's greatest legacy to the world isn't only its beautiful beaches, emotional morna music, or lively dances. It's the spirit of never giving up. The Blue Sharks may have stopped their journey, but Cape Verde's name will be remembered forever as one of the most inspiring stories in modern football and human development history. Now, when the sound of morna rises, the whole world knows who they are. True giants born from tiny islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.